Welcome back to Throwing It Down with Medidi. Talking about the Washington Commanders today. The Manders, the other word, because I don't want to get canceled, or the football team kind of grew the name the football team on me because it was pretty unique and it gave it a soccer feeling, and it was very funny how it all came into existence because of the in because of the terrible ownership of the football team and their failure to properly go through the renaming process and a bunch of other things like finding a coach and having your owner get questioned in federal court. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with this football team. But with all that said, let's talk about their 2022 football schedule. They kind of have an easy schedule. Like the rest of the NFCs, they're playing against the NFC South. No, they're playing the NFC North and AFC South. So that's the Colts, the Titans, the Jaguars, the Texans. Two pretty winnable games. And then they're playing the Vikings, Green Bay, Lions, and the Bears. Another two winnable games. We'll see how Green Bay does. Minnesota, I think, is going to be a team that the league is not ready for, but that's another time. And then they play against the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the Giants twice a year. And then their third place games are against the Falcons, 49ers, and Browns. Browns kind of unlucky, especially since it's at the very end of the season when they'll probably have Deshaun Watson back. But the Falcons is a really nice game to play instead of potentially the Panthers, because they were kind of the two teams in the running for third place in the NFC South. The Commanders didn't really add that many pieces throughout that offseason. They added a couple defensive tackles, a cornerback, and they didn't do much in the draft either. They drafted Percy Butler from Louisiana, safety, and then a 7th-round cornerback. Nothing to help one of the worst pass defenses in football, giving up a 28th place finish in the yards per attempt category for opposing quarterbacks. They had a very decent run defense, but their pass defense really struggled with, especially with injuries to their defensive line, which they're still dealing with. Chase Young is on the PUP list, so he's looking like he might not be ready to start this season, and he's a top 10 pass rusher in the league, who they need to hold down the defense in general, because while Montez Sweat is pretty good on the team, they need both at least to even compete with some of these other teams in the division and in the NFC. Going off of who else they drafted Jahan Dotson out of Penn State. Very excited to see him. Brian Robinson Jr. out of Alabama. We all love Alabama running backs, except Trent Richardson. Don't forget about Trent Richardson. He still exists. He sucked. But regardless, they didn't draft much to help their secondary, potentially hurting their chances at getting a decent playoff position or even making it into the playoffs at all. It might be a struggle for them. Going back to their schedule, I think they have a pretty decent schedule, especially with how it lines up. And, if Deshaun Watson plays, that Browns game could really be a toss-up. They played their teams tough in their own division. Yeah, they lost both games against the Cowboys and Eagles last year, but I think the Cowboys got worse. And there was a game against the Cowboys last year that Washington probably should have won because the Cowboys kept on turning the ball over. And when you have a inexperienced quarterback there, it's just really hard to know how to capitalize on those mistakes. It's easy to theorize how to capitalize because obviously everybody wants to, take away the ball, get good field position, but the practice, especially when you have a subpar team, just in general, it's a little tough. Now, let's get to the quarterback. Yeah, they signed Carson Wentz. Yeah, people don't like him. I always think he's better than people think he is. I like to talk about public opinion because my opinion is what I think, but I'm reacting to what other people are saying, and if you're watching these videos, you might know already what other people are saying, so I like to voice my opinions against the consensus, just because it gives a different opinion rather than saying he's bad or he's good. So, Carson Wentz, very underrated. He was the MVP until he tore his ACL before the Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl. And then he's had a rough time playing since then. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not like he was great in Indianapolis, but he definitely helped lead the team to a couple wins. And he's a very sporadic quarterback. Sometimes he makes really good plays, sometimes he doesn't. But I'm just not loving the fact that he's replacing another sporadic quarterback. So I think he's better overall, and I think he's just smarter when it comes to football because he has more in-game experience. He's playing with a lot of good pass catchers and running backs. He's playing with J.D. McKissic. Not saying he's a good running back, but he's a great pass-catching back. Antonio Gibson. Now he has Brian Robinson, a huge back out of Alabama, who is going to help them in the run game and the pass-blocking game, which is incredibly important, especially for Wentz, and a Washington offensive line that's pretty mediocre. You don't really hear a lot about the Washington offensive line. It's probably because they do their job. They're probably in the top half of the NFL just because they're not garbage like I don't know, like Pittsburgh's offensive line. They're trash. They're kind of in the realm of the Arizona Cardinals or teams like that where you have these decent offensive lines that aren't special but aren't terrible. Their games last season are really sporadic. They beat trash teams. They went on a 4-game winning streak after their bye week, beating teams like the Buccaneers and the Raiders. So they have potential, and the upgraded quarterback is really going to help them. I imagine they're going to be in a lot of high-scoring games, so their fantasy options at receiver are, in my opinion, good plays, and J.D. McKissic, and because they're going to have to score points because their secondary is not going to be able to withhold these other teams that they're playing, where even teams like Jacksonville, they got better in the draft and just through a year of experience, gaining Travis Etienne, getting a whole new receiving core minus Marvin Jones and Dan Arnold. Even though they aren't even a top half of the NFL offense, they're still going to be able to put up points because they have okay playmakers. So, long story short, I think Washington's going to do better than they did last year. They added some talent on offense, adding another receiver, hopefully getting Curtis Samuel back. I like De'Ami Brown, the receiver out of North Carolina they drafted last year. So they have 4 receiver deep rotation. They have 3 running backs who can add quality plays to their offense. And they added a better quarterback. Their offense is going to be better. Their defense might stay the same, and that might hurt them in some games against these really powerful offenses like the Eagles this year or like Minnesota. But other than that, they're going to be competitive in just about every game because of their offensive capability, and I see them tying the Dallas Cowboys with a 9-8 record. You heard it right. They're actually going to tie the Cowboys. Not going to say if they're going to beat them this year or anything. We'll see when it gets to that point. Dallas has a lot of struggles, especially on the offensive line, that give me hesitancy to even think that they could be the team they were last year. But I believe that Washington's going to outperform what the sports books and what other, just normal people would say is a pretty mediocre team. So thank you for listening, and next I'm going to talk about the worst team in the NFC East. And also, I'm being forced to do this video by one of my coworkers. I'm being held hostage by his desire to see me talk about the worst team in the NFC East. I don't know why. They're not going to be doing that well this year, but regardless, I'll be back hopefully Wednesday. I don't want to say a date because last time I couldn't keep my word, but regardless, see you next time. Later.